They call themselves retirement recidivists. My guests, Bruce Hiland and Ted Kaufman, tried but failed not once, but several times to call time on busy, high profile careers. They're the authors of the book, Retiring. Your next chapter is about much more than money. Hi there, Bruce.
Good morning.
Hello, Ted.
How you doing?
So, Bruce, you are 82, Ted, you're 83, and you guys are bang on trend. I'm thinking about the mega trend of unretirement these days. People, calling quits to full time careers and then developing portfolio careers. Before you tell us how you became such pace setters, let's hear your career highlights. First to you, Bruce.
A quick tour. Came out of college. I was a Navy officer for a couple of years, and looking back on it, I recognize that's where I lost all awe of people in high positions of authority by virtue of the assignment I had, which was pure dumb luck. After the Navy, I got my MBA, where Ted and I met. Went from my MBA into McKinsey, and the boot camp of that world. After McKinsey, I went off on my own, and then took a stint on the other side of the desk as a corporate executive at Time Inc. for 5 years. And then along the way, we picked up a farm in Vermont, and I did some commuting back and forth from Vermont to New York City on my consulting. And while in Vermont, got very much involved in the community, helping startups, entrepreneurial activity, community leadership roles, and the like. And that gets me through a couple of efforts at retirement, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll get your potted retirement histories too, because that's a whole nother story, isn't it? And a book now as well. Now, I'd like to hear from you, Ted. And I understand that we can talk about your best friend Joe, who lives in a pretty gorgeous White House in Washington D.C. He figures large in your career history.
Sure. No, after I got an engineering degree, worked in engineering in corporate America for a number of years, and decided that I was very much interested in the business side and the management side of life, and went back to work and met Bruce. We had some very common ideas. After that, I went to work for the DuPont company, and I was living in Wilmington, Delaware, when this 29-year-old, not eligible to be a senator, decided to run for the United States Senate in 1972. I helped him on his campaign, and then took a 1-year leave of absence to help him get his office organized, and then stayed for 22 years, and 19 of those years as chief of staff.
And
Uh,
that's so chief of staff for Joe Biden, now president, and then you assumed his spot in the Senate?
right. Then he went out, and then when he was picked to be vice president, Ruth Ann Minner, the governor of Delaware, selected me to be the United States Senator, which I was for 2 years.
Did you enjoy
And
that?
and then after that is what I consider retirement, was to be a professor, a visiting professor of the practice at the Duke Law School, and also serve on a number of boards and organizations.
Well, so that's just it. Your retirement stories, you didn't really give up work in the formal sense. You just did different
No,
things. And was the
yeah, no.
work you,
Our basic definition of retirement is a time when you begin to control your own life. So if you're working, and so basically, I did that in 1995 when I left Senator Biden's office.
I
So we're
have to
in
do the
control.
math. You're 83 now, so
Right.
that would have been what? You were in your 50s?
Yeah,
So that was your first stab at being fully retired, and you ended up teaching for
yeah.
20 years.
But full retired, and it's really important to the definition of retirement. It's fully retired for Bruce and me. If you read the book, you'll find is really being quite engaged. I mean, still working. I mean, when I left Senator Biden's office, I was still working 65, 70 hours a week for a number of years after that. So, but the big definition we came up with is that you are in control of your own schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, retirement doesn't mean so much to many people these days. They just know. I mean, I suppose blue and white collar workers, the whole human mix, we all have to decide how we're going to carry on carrying on. And we can get into the nuts and bolts of how you both stay engaged and how you define retirement. To your retirement story now, Bruce, I understand you were in your 50s as well when you had your first stab at it.
Yeah, the first try was interesting because my principal client at the time was the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, and John and I had a deal that I wouldn't, and I bought the farm in Vermont, and John made me promise that I wouldn't leave for Vermont until he retired. So when he retired, I thought I'd retire to Vermont, which lasted exactly 6 months. I discovered that really what I had needed was a sabbatical, not retirement. And in that 6 months, I had the satisfaction of doing lots of physical labor. One of my prized possessions still is the porch swing that hangs on the porch of the farm in Vermont to this day, which I built from raw wood. It was that kind of offset to the brain work of consulting and the people intensive work where I could do stuff all entirely on my own and have a physical, tangible product at the end of it. Anyway, 6 months later, the new chairman of the exchange called and said it was time for me to come back to New York. So I basically commuted half-time to the city until 2011, and then said I'd had enough of New York, back to Ted's point about when you really control your schedule. And I said, I don't need to consult anymore for a whole set of reasons. And then spent all my time in Vermont, but it was not exactly downtime. That was the second try at retirement, and discovered that I was very much involved in the community. I was involved in startups. There were a lot of places where I could bring what I'd picked up over the years to bear on community problems.
Did you become sort of the sage of Middlebury, Vermont? Everyone coming to you.
The sage was a term my father used when I was in third grade, which I just try and stay away from. But it was very satisfying because I was able to bring to bear a lot of the skills and experience on problems in my community and opportunities in my community. And that was good, and except it turned into pretty much a full-time activity.
So when did you guys think what the world needs now is another book on retirement? Because the bookshelves are bursting with books about how to retire. And, as we know, most of it is all the anxiety about living longer and not outlasting your money.
Well, Ted and I physically reconnected when we found ourselves down at Vero Beach in the winter. And what we were discovering, and the way the book came to be, was that we were having a great time at retirement. We were doing all the stuff we're talking about, but we had a lot of friends and acquaintances who were not happy in their retired state. And we talked about this, listened to a lot of people, asked a lot of questions. And then one morning at the Burger King in Wabasso, Florida, Ted looked across the table and said, we ought to write a book. And we decided that we would write a book to help people have a fulfilling retirement. Is it fair enough, Ted?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think one of the biggest things we found and learned was the retirement's changed a lot since our parents retired. Most people I know, their parents went to work for a big organization, and then they worked till they were 65, and then they retired, and they lived for like 7 to 10 years. And you could do that by playing golf and sitting on the back porch. What's happening more and more, as I brought home clearly to me when my son-in-law retired at 56, he has 30 to 35 years of retirement. And so once you start looking, we found very few people actually realized how things had changed. I know it sounds, and they were failing retirement because they thought they could go out and figure out something to do like their parents had or other people, and that they could, play golf or get involved and take trips. Or my personal favorite, Bruce and mine, is someone in a major newspaper said that he's a major executive. He's going to retire. He's going to take walks, spend time with his grandchildren, and read. Yeah. Now that is a prescription for unmitigated retirement disaster. But that's what people were thinking. All of a sudden they woke up like 2, 5, 6 years after they retired, and they still got 20, 25 years of retirement, and they are bored out of their skull.
Yeah.
So our basic approach, that's why we decided to, over a number of years of at the Burger King in Wabasso, talking about this thing, we decided that, yeah, maybe we ought to think about this. And then it was a couple of years after that we did it. But it's a perfect example for what a retirement project is. And a retirement project is something that, you do, but you're not in a hurry. You do it right. You take your time, you slow down, you spend more time on it, and the rest of that. I mean, one of the great things about our thing is Bruce and I have now been doing this for probably 7 years, and it just keeps giving. And, it's just as interesting today as it's all new challenges, but it's really interesting today. And so absolutely, the book has turned out to be a wonderful retirement project.
And you haven't both ever been checked in your retirement activities by health problems or challenges, because this is the narrative we think about. We often hear, oh, it's all decline, and people who are 82 and 83 are not going to be, they're going to want to pull up the sofa and grab their slippers. And you guys have been out there since you had your first try at
Yeah. So Susan,
first
basically,
failure.
the definition we have is most people we know that are retiring now are retiring in the 50s. And they're retiring in much better shape and more concentration on maintaining good shape. So we don't have a whole lot of. We're reaching the point now where people are retired, the old classic retirement when you get to your 80s. But it's just people have 20, 25 years of being in good health before they reach that point, and they've got to come up with a way to kind of enjoy that period and get satisfaction out of the period. And most of the standard kind of solutions, traveling, spending time with your grandchildren, the rest of it will not do that for them.
Yeah, I mean, it'll sustain you for a couple of years, and then you'll be going, what now?
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
you get beset by a cascade of health issues and challenges then, because you've completely withdrawn from the fabric of society and you don't feel like you're up to much anymore. I mean, that's the whole thing with the big middle. We're looking at demographic change and we're living longer. So your book is all about the non-financial side of it. So what are the pieces that you've identified that need to be given more attention when people think about, I hate even using the word because I think retirement's on its last legs. Retirement doesn't really mean much, but when you have more control over your agenda, what are the pieces that need to be given more attention than they're getting?
Number one, capital letters, bright lights, trumpet fanfare, is figure out what you're going to do. Because the simple psychological fact is so much of your identity came from what it was doing when you were working. And you're not going to be doing that kind of work anymore. So the question is, who am I? What do I want to do? What can I do? And the decision as to what to do is critical. I had a good friend, neighbor, senior Wall Street guy years ago sat me down. I can remember him leaning across the table to me at lunch and saying, tell them, when this was about writing the book, he said, tell them, you've got to have a plan of what to do. And that's it. You're going to have a plan of what to do. You're going to have to decide where you're going to live. You're going to have to take care of your body, your brain. You're going to have to take care of your relationships. And along the way, you're going to take care of your soul. But you've got to have a plan. You've got to clearly think about what it is you're going to do, given your freedom to control your schedule.
It's addition by subtraction. I mean, most people, when they think about retirement, think about, well, I'm not going to have all the stress. I'm not going to have all the things they're not going to have. And it's really quite extraordinary. I mean, Bruce and I, it's truly extraordinary. They don't think about, what am I going to do? What is it that I'm going to go down? I'm going to go to Florida. I'm going to go somewhere. I'm going to, and I'm going to read books. And like I said, read books and take walks and spend time with your grandchildren. That doesn't work. So you've got to take the same approach you used to be successful in whatever you did during your career, and you've got to take it and level totally on on what you're going to do when you retire.
Did you guys only hear the stories of men like you? Because, you're of a breed. You are exemplars
Mhm.
of an era of, let's call it what it is, white, richly resourced men enjoying all the fruits of a
Mhm.
top tier education and powerful professional
Mhm.
networks. Was it inevitable that once you surrendered your career
Mhm.
identity of 40 years, you would fail at any sort of a cliff edge stop?
Oh,
Unlike, let's say,
I think it's one
somebody's.
thing.
Go
Yeah, we
ahead.
spent a lot of time talking to women. I mean, one of the big changes is that women when we were growing up did not have jobs and the rest of that. So and you realize after you start talking to the women that they're just as concerned. They do a better, by the way, by and large, they do a better job than men at not getting gulled into this. I'm just going to go off and have a good time. I mean, they really have stuff planned. One of my favorite quotes is from a corporation I know where the wife said to the husband, "I married you for good times and bad, but not for lunch." And so the idea, they knew what they were going to be doing. They had planned their part of the career. They're not so much of a problem now that you have women who are 24/7 big executives, the rest of it. Problem is totally the same. I mean,
And
it
did you
is
speak to high achieving women with
Yeah.
that sort of
oh
status
yeah,
and
oh yeah.
profile about this?
I
Yeah.
mean, people, high achieving women, but all different types of women. We kept coming back with a common theme, and there wasn't a whole lot of difference when you talk to high achieving women in retirement and talk to high achieving men in retirement. Uh,
Well, I'm glad that came out because you often hear, oh, well, for women it's different. No, it's not. I've been
well, let me put it
identified
this
with
way,
my
Susan. The
career
best
all
the
my
best
life.
example is that our best customers are women. I mean, it's the number of women who have come up, contacted us about how much they're enjoying the book and the rest of it. Now, to be fair, a lot of the women enjoy it because they give it to their husband who is
Right.
failing retirement. So it's, but in terms of, if you look at the support we've gotten and you read just go in and look at the reviews on Amazon and look at the reviews that the women write and what the men write. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find a whole
I did
difference.
read them. They were all
Yeah.
glowing 5-star
Yeah.
reviews. So
Yeah.
well done, chapeau.
Yeah. Well,
Thanks.
by the way, it was a major concern for us because you raised it. Because here we are, we're victims, of a different generation. But so Bruce and I worked really hard at it and got a lot of good help from our wives and friends and the rest of that. And it turned out to be, to not be a problem.
Well, you've both been
So,
married for a long time. 63 years, is it? And
Mhm.
59 years? Tell me about your
63 years.
wives. And did they have careers or did they um, have the career of being at home and doing all of the heavy lifting of raising children?
all of the above. In my case, Jenny did it both. I mean, she was the homemaker. She took most of the heavy lifting, raising the kids, and then she did volunteer work. And then she went off, decided to go back to graduate school, went to Yale, got a master's degree in public health. And the next thing I knew, she was running the health district in the town, in the area we lived in Connecticut. And then we've both been blessed with incredible partners beyond the husband-wife easy image, and the kind of partnership that Jenny and I have enjoyed has enabled me to have really superb counsel as I was working through issues or sometimes even working on client problems. But
It's so wonderful to hear you recognize that, the contribution that your partner
I think,
makes. And you've had
Susan,
those
I think
solid foundations.
yeah, when you all our friends, people we know, and I'm not talking about people who just had high power jobs, the rest of it. It's pretty much standard uh, for that people are aware of this, that they know the world has changed, that they're well up to it. I mean, Lynn had a number of different jobs after the kids were grown. I mean, they were faced with the same thing when the kids were grown, as it, it, in terms of finding something to do and finding something to do when the kids went to school. So it's a totally different woman. And the biggest thing, Susan, is the opportunities for women just have grown. We're nowhere near where we should be. I've got 3 daughters, no sons. Okay, first 3 grandchildren were daughters, so I'm very concerned about it's still not where we should be. But when I was making selections for the presidential transition, picking people, I didn't have to have any special requirement for women to have diversity. If you look at the Biden administration and look at the transition, you will find, and the cabinet secretaries and everything else, you will find that there's more women in there than there are men, and it's because they are so incredibly qualified once they were given a chance to get the same education and the rest of it. So women are coming along. Women are doing great. Still have a way to go. We still have lots of
We just
diversity.
need to scale it all up. Absolutely. Get the numbers up,
Yeah.
because we're definitely capable of running the world.
But,
Everybody's
and by the
much
way,
as,
I mean, Nancy Pelosi. I mean, there are plenty of Hillary Clinton. I mean, there's plenty of women who have, and I'm just throwing the 2 of them out, but I can go on and on and on. Look at who's running for office tomorrow in terms of this country. It's a different world. It's great. It's a much more of a diverse world.
it's
And
diverse, but we also have a lot of precarity. I'm interested to know, Bruce, what do you tell your grandkids about whether they will actually even enjoy a sliver of the notion of retirement, about kicking back and maybe enjoying the fruits of your labor? Because the new map of longer life means a 60-year career, chop change, depending on what profession you go into, and a high degree of, in all likelihood, financial precarity as we go through the coming decades.
Um, First off, Susan, I'm really chary about advising my grandchildren about a future that I really don't understand. The way the current world plays out is a mystery. So I'm not going to presume to tell the kids what to do. And over this past weekend, we just had the opportunity to have everybody together. What we focused on, I guess this gets to a core question. What we focused on in parenting was to provide an example of how to live your life, and step back when the decisions got to be made. So with both of our kids, we were always supportive, but never directive. We didn't spell out things that they should accomplish at some point. So you bring that up to the moment. My 2 youngest grandchildren are 22, and they both happen to be graduating in the next couple of weekends. I wouldn't begin to suggest how they make their decisions. But we were delighted sitting around a table on Saturday evening to see them with their partners expressing the same values and standards and conveying their sense of what's worth doing in their activities now. And Jenny and I both came back and said, boy, lucky us, it worked. So I don't know if that's at all helpful.
I've often declared the notion of retirement as it was hatched post-war to be more or less dead, the crushing of the unions, all of this. But what you guys are doing, still under the retirement, unretirement umbrella, is doing exactly what is the nouvelle vague. We all want to keep going. We don't want to spend 40 years on a sofa. And if you do want to spend 40 years on a sofa, you'll probably only get 20.
If that. They're looking for a different retirement than what they're now. My 3 daughters are all retired. Okay, so I'm not explaining. I mean, I'm working on granddaughters now and grandsons in terms of what.
But do your 3 daughters have that classic retirement, traditional retirement, where full stop, out of full-time work, and now they're building their lives sideways and up and down, however which they want, getting back to your freedom definition? Because, I mean,
I think the point I've been trying to make is that it's not that much different for them than it is for their husbands. I mean, they had fulfilling jobs that they did. They raised the children, the rest of that. And then they did more of that than our our grandkids are faced with, many more challenges in terms of raising children and having a job at the same time, and they're handling it just beautifully.
I
But no,
guess
I'm
what I
my three.
keep trying to point out is just though that it's a bit of a misnomer now, because the expectations that society still dishes are, a couple running down a beach. It's usually a
No,
heterosexual couple
Susan,
running down a beach.
I,
And
I,
no,
I
but
hate to.
there are two sides to it. And
No,
I
no, I'm
know
just saying, I don't think that's the way I look at my children who are retiring. They're not looking to run down the beach. They're
but I'm
not
just saying
looking,
the narrative is still out there when you look
Yes,
at the financial
and
services
that's why we wrote the
providers.
now,
book. The book is
it's
that's,
about,
as usual, you hit right on point. That's the reason we wrote the book, is so that people can realize that older view of retirement. The point I want to make is it falls on they understand it right away. I mean, they kind of get the idea they're going to retire, and that they're going to retire. I mean, I have a grandson retired, as I said before. I mean, a son-in-law retired at 55 from a full-time job, and he's retired.
But
let me come at
but
this
for
from
him,
this.
that means just carrying on doing other things, but off the leash, off the chain of the full-time employer that he was working with, or maybe as
It
his own
gets back to
company.
the key definition of retirement for the book is he gets control of his own time.
Yeah. So
There,
maybe we have to retire the word retirement. I
well,
certainly
No, I
okay.
in
think the
my
word
book.
retire, we got
Okay,
to.
I'm going to come at this and I want to go back to one of the early comments you've made at the very start of this discussion, Susan. You talked about how many books there are out there on retirement. Yes, there are lots of books out there on retirement, and I've done the arithmetic, and I think the one number I came up with one time was that 92% of the books about retirement had to do with money. All or most of the book was about money. Now, that's that's what Ted and I entitled it, that retirement's about a lot more, much more than money. The problem with the continuing the notion of the people skipping down the beach, I think, comes from the focus on money, financial advisors, wealth advisors, blah, blah, blah. All the stuff you see on the tube, all the stuff you see in magazines, talking to people about retirement in purely financial terms. And that was one of the things that Ted and I, the kind of flash one day, was that we were talking about all these people we knew that were failing at retirement. And the consistent thread with all of them was that none of them had any money problems.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So this
Yeah.
is a dialogue of privilege. When you're talking about, let's say, labor-intensive job
No.
holders for decades, but just hear me
Oh.
out for a sec. They would end up they're struggling for survival still. So they are worried about how the money side of things. How are they going to, if they're shoved out of work before time? A lot of people suffer ageism. Employers routinely get rid of people in their early 50s, definitely in their 60s, and then suddenly you're left high and dry, and you haven't been able to build for your retirement because you didn't have a white collar job.
That is Susan, you're right on point. That's a very important problem. That does not have to do with the definition of what retirement is, though, in my opinion. People are faced with all kinds of different positions when they get into their 50s and 60s, but more and more you are finding, and that's why I think the book is selling so well. More and more people understand, and at all levels of society, that they don't want to do this anymore. They don't want to do the 24/7 kind of job. They want to get out, and but they want to be creative. They want to do things. I mean, the thing that's amazing about retirement is if you take our book, one of the amazing things about this book has been, I get people 25, 30, 35 using the book. Because when you look at we just went through the pandemic, and people were not working in an office; they were working at home. They're planning their own days. Yeah. They got all the tests that we have. So I think the retirement is a wonderful, wonderful word to explain that I want to be able to plan for this retirement. And as Bruce has said so eloquently, it's about as the title says, it's about a lot more than just money. And that's really what our book is. We're trying to get our book in the hands of people who are faced with this challenge, whatever their age, whatever their situation, whatever their thing. We say the first thing you got to do is you got to make sure you have the money to do it. Second thing you have to do is sit down and figure out what is your plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it depends on someone's education, someone's place in socioeconomic terms about how equipped they are to do that.
Right.
But I'm completely
And
with you. I'm a big student of Professor Andrew Scott, the co-author of The 100-Year Life, you know, lifelong learning, pivoting, making transitions. And we know from all of the studies that have been done that staying engaged is critical. You cannot withdraw from your life, or you will molder and you will invite a number of physiologic
You
and
will fail retirement. That's
psychological.
exactly what
Yeah.
our book's about. You will fail retirement. We found it over and over again, and that's the reason we wrote the book. And the other thing about it is, you know, any profits we make go to charity. So we're doing this as kind of a wonderful retirement project, but basically we want to get more people to understand that retirement can be a wonderful time, but you've got to plan for it like you plan for everything else in your life.
Okay. Well, how can we, as a society, I'm thinking about Western societies, OECD countries, how can we, civil society, government policymakers, put some equality back into the picture when it comes to being in a position where, you know, you're not thinking, oh, I'm going to have to take a job down at the box store in order to keep food on the table and I'm 78.
Well, the answer to that, of course, that's a political, that's a political question. And the answer to that is we got to have better retirement plans for people. We got to take care of people, you know, make sure that they have the funds to retire. Because right now, you know, like the people I know, a lot of people I know were in unions. They were in unions and they retired and they had a nice union payout. The UAW, we had two UAW plants in here. Nobody was retiring from the UAW back in those days and wondered about, you know, where am I going to get the money from?
No, I
So
mean,
I
the
think the
labor
decline,
landscape has changed
and
incredibly.
exactly right. So that's a gigantic. That's where you are ideologically on the political spectrum. How much you should worry about that. I think you look at the two parties and kind of figure out, you know, which party's kind of concerned about that and which party isn't, in terms of making sure that everybody has an opportunity to retire and have a worthwhile retirement. But that's more of a political question than it is kind of a question for our book.
Which is kind of why I asked you, Ted,
I know.
because
Yeah.
yeah.
you're sort of steeped in politics. And, you know, if you
Yeah.
had Joe, your best friend Joe's ear tomorrow, with the demographic upheaval that's going on, longer lives, decreasing birth rates, we need the olders to be invited into workplaces. And that is happening to varying degrees. Germany's making a great stab at it,
No,
Singapore,
but I think if you look
several
at, again,
places
not to
like
get
this.
on political thing, but if you go look at what Joe Biden has said, look what Joe Biden said about on all these issues, and look at where he's having a problem getting things done, because there are people that just don't. They say, you know, hey, look, everybody's got theirs. You know, work it
Bruce?
out.
Yeah, yeah. It's no, it's tough. And it's like the Titanic. It's hard to make the policy changes that are going to turn the big ships around on a dime. You know, it's very, very difficult to make structural change. But there are a lot of people that are left behind, you know, with all of this.
Absolutely,
And
could not
that's the
agree more.
thing. Yeah, we had Nomadland. Did you see that movie or read
Mm.
the book? There are a lot of people suffering, and we all see the homelessness in the streets of London, the streets of Los Angeles. There's got to be a better way to, you know, I'm just thinking about the billionaire bonanza we just saw over the past 2 years of COVID. You know, so 99% of humanity, they're losers. You know, it's something's got to be done to rectify all this. And I don't have a clue what, but we need to find different ways of giving people the incentives and the financial backing to have lifelong learning, to make the pivots and the transitions. Because someone who's done a job where they're on their feet for 4 decades certainly can't be called upon to do a similar job for less money. So there's all kinds of things that are wrapped into that. And I appreciate that you're trying to get everyone to think beyond the financial side. But I did want to point out that for some people, that's all they can think of because that's impossible for them. They're just in survival mode.
Absolutely.
So I want to go back to the four dimensions that you've brought in that are non-financial. How do you both, in turn, take care of your brain?
Oh, let's see. It's this. Well, the first thing I do in the morning is I pick up my iPhone and see what the weather is, and then I do Wordle, and then I do spelling bee, and I don't get up until I've gotten both of those done, which generally takes 25 or 30 minutes. Then the taking care of my mind is that there's a habit pattern built up over the years in terms of staying informed. And technology works nicely because I can sit at the breakfast table and scan the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, the Vermont Digger, which is our state paper,
Oh, I
the
love that.
the Addison County Independent, which serves our immediate community. So that kind of information coming in is that's continuing to feed my mental machine. The then Ted and I decided to write a book one time. So we
So
have
yeah,
this
there's that.
we have this retirement quote project end quote that has gone from a project into a, pardon the expression, almost a business, because we're trying to, in our early 80s, we're trying to figure out how you interact with the Amazon algorithms to get this book to all the people that we'd like to have this book get to, so that they'd have the benefit of the book. And if there's any money that comes out of it, we can give, in our case, Jenny and I would support one of the homeless shelters and that kind of stuff locally. So that, you know, I think Ted and I confessed this the other day. One of the first things we do in the morning after breakfast is you go in and you check on your machine to see what the Amazon orders were yesterday, and
Yeah.
and how that advertising campaign is working. And then it's off to, you know, the rest of life. And the rest of life here, I have the benefit of living in a college community, and so I live at my neighborhood I refer to as an academic ghetto. I'm surrounded by wonderfully smart people. So if I have a conversation on the street, it's a stimulating conversation. But I also have access to talks at the college. I can sit in on Zoom lectures. We have a group in the community called Town and Gown, which is community and academic leaders, all old guys, or not old guys, old people. Which is because everybody, to be in it, you have to be retired. But I finally got the women involved. We've got a nice proportion of women in important positions, both in the academic world and the community. So we have discussions. We have a speaker, and then we have these incredibly lively discussions, out of which inevitably come additional things to do. So this keeps generating, you know, mini projects, if you will. We have a conversation with a newspaper publisher about pushing this issue or that. So
And is it the
keeping my
same?
brain
Sorry.
busy, not a problem for me.
No, absolutely. And is it the same for you, Ted? You've got a long list of
No,
things that you do
I
as a
think,
ritual.
yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I think what we did with the book was to go to people who, you know, have thought about this more than Bruce and me, and come up with suggestions on how you proceed. I think the main thing is that we laid out what the major areas of interest are: the spiritual, the, you know, and the rest of it, so that people can take the book, pick it up, read it, and direct them to places where they can get even more information on what it is uh, that they want to do. But it's really interesting when you get in your 80s, you really compartmentalize these things. I mean, and before that, when you're in the 50s and 60s, you're doing all these different things. But when you get to the 80s, when you sit down, like Bruce says, you know, this is what I want to do first thing in the morning to deal with the brain thing. You know, like for instance, I get up and I go to daily mass every morning. That's how I deal with the spiritual side
Ah, so
of
this is
what.
you, the soul dimension.
Yeah, and
You go to mass.
you know, I can go and I can. I mean, it's really wonderful if you're living in a world that we're living in today, where you can listen to the priest from the altar talk about do unto others as others would do unto you, and no one laughs. You know, where you get back to what spiritual, and that's the way you don't. But you don't have to go to church. You don't have to be in a religion. We've given a number of websites people can go to. A spiritual thing, which is not really. It doesn't have to necessarily be about God. It's about, you know, how you think more in a more spiritual way, um, you know, about things. So you go through each one, the physical thing, and the physical thing every day at 4 o'clock. I walk for 40 minutes, and that's that piece. And the interim are all the other different projects that I've gotten myself involved in to balance between small projects, individual projects, boards. It's once you do it, I'll never forget when we first started this book. In fact, back when we were still talking about it, I had a friend who lived in Connecticut, and they were having a birthday party. I bumped into one of his friends who's 75 and made a big success on the stock market. I said to him, Patty, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm coaching an 8th grade girls lacrosse team, and I'm working at an animal rescue shelter. It's not nuclear physics, Susan. If you sit down and go out and say, this is what I want to do, and you don't worry about, status and all the rest of that, but here's something I can do to help.
Yeah.
You can
And you
figure
let
out
your
how to do it.
interests guide you to where you need to be. Where
That's
you can
right.
make a
And well, one of the
contribution.
things that we suggest is that you start out, when you first come to the concept planning, start writing down, what am I going to do? I mean, it's a really, when I did my retirement, I had like 35 things on my list of things I wanted to do. This is before I thought about all these things that Bruce and I came up with, the rest of it, 35 things. And I got through 12 and I filled my list. That's what I was doing. So I think the first step is just so common sense, but people just don't do it. You put out a list that's going to be travel and spending time with your grandchildren and taking walks in the woods. That is a list that you can look at with a straight face and say, oh yeah, that'll solve my days. I'll be very fulfilled doing that.
But some people might be. Some people
By
that
the
have
way, I
really
agree.
hard slog jobs might just say, oh my God, I can't wait for the day when I can
That's
just
that's
loaf
the
about
killer.
and watch TV and have the freedom. We're back to, the
That's
sense of
not the
community.
answer, Susan.
Okay.
That's the
No,
problem.
but for some people, you
No, I'm
guys
just
are
Some
saying
high
people,
they
achievers.
hold
go
it.
down a path, though. My point is, if you start out with that as your objective, you don't do the hard work that gets you beyond the fact that on the 5th day that you've sat home watching TV and reading a book, it ain't fun. It ain't
Let's
good. It's not your retirement. So it gets
let's
you
ta-
off totally on the wrong track.
let's take one of the people that Susan refers to who's been worked so hard and they can't wait to stop working.
Right.
Okay, so they stop working and they could get the hammock, they can do whatever they want and let's give them 6 months of that. I don't think they'll last. They won't last 3 months, but I'll give you 6 months for discussion. And at the end of 6 months, they're not going to be tired anymore. They're going to be bored out of their skull, because if they had the job that got them so worked out and tired, their mind, they've been doing things, they'd have been interacting with people and solving problems. And it's 6 months in the hammock, it doesn't happen.
No,
So
And by
absolutely.
the
that's
way,
why
they're
we,
not spending time in the hammock. They're spending time sitting watching the TV. Or
yeah,
they're sitting,
which is worse.
which is worse. And then you reach the point, and Bruce and I met people, it's too late for them.
Their cells have
It's
shut
too
down
late for
one
them
by
to,
one.
they have, their whole life has gotten so non-substantive, that's when you really start worrying about dementia, and you start worrying about health, and you start worrying about things like that. That is a perfect path to having health problems, having mental problems, and the rest of that is a
Exactly.
plan that says, I'm going to lie on a hammock because I didn't like my work. It's a perfect example, Susan, of what the book's all about.
No, I mean, we have to have meaning. We have to have purpose. We must stay engaged. And I just did a 2-week tour of Provence.
Yeah.
We were thinking about buying a property there. And not only is it massively expensive, which we expected, it's also, most of the properties are in the middle of nowhere, sleepy villages, nice to be a tourist and visit them. But what would you do of a day? You'd be taking care of your physical needs, going, getting the groceries. That's not enough.
Bingo.
You might be tethered to your laptop. You might be tethered to your laptop doing some Zooms. I make podcasts, I do interviews, I teach, I do all kinds of things. But I also need the backdrop of a pulsating city to
Right.
keep me alive. I mean, I really do. I thought about what I would do, and I thought, well, I would be a potted plant. After I've gone for a hike, walked the dog, done some calisthenics, done a bit of yoga, then what? Think asparagus or broccoli with the salmon for dinner. What?
And by the way, that's exactly right. Back in the day when Bruce and I were both working hard, going to Provence and having a little place away from everybody where you don't have to talk to anybody was a great vacation. Going to Vero Beach, Florida, and talking to Bruce and not talking to anybody else, and just kind of recovering and recharging, that was perfect. That is not the thing that's going to work for you once you have 100% of your time under your own control.
Yeah, you need some texture in your life. And if you're of a certain person who's curious and likes to learn, and curiosity, I think, is the key. You want to see, and you want to give back too. I mean, it's one of the tenets that we all
That's
find
all
as we
this,
hit midlife.
Susan, with all due respect, that's what our book's all about. Our book is all about a menu for someone that says, I don't want to just become couch potato. I just don't want to sit around and watch TV. I just don't want to lay on a couch. I've had a interesting life and I want to do more things. And that's what our book is. Our book
Well,
is a
your book
menu.
is, by the way, on the way. Let's hope. I have ordered it, but it didn't show up in time. Now, I
Yeah.
want to ask you, just to wind up, what are your future plans? I mean, you seem like such a lively pair. Can you take this on the road? Can you start delivering workshops around? I mean, you're
Hold
doing
it.
it in an ad hoc way
Oh,
now.
hold it. Hold it. He's 83. I'm 82. This was a hobby project for retired guys. We did everything except prick our fingers in blood and do that thing for the guys. But we did agree we're not going to do book tours. We're not doing a lecture circuit. We're
Right.
happy to do something where I come in my office and turn my computer on and Zoom with somebody in London. That's fine. But we're not going to be chasing around doing the kind of wild activities that we did before. Frankly, I mean, I can still go out and walk pretty fast for quite a long time, but that's a long way between racing to the airport, changing planes in Newark, and all the crap that goes with the kind of building activities that you're talking about.
Now
Just
you're
one way,
talking, I so
one
in
way to
sync
kind
with
of
you.
one way to kind of sum this up, Susan, is I bet that kind of talk kept us from writing the book for at least 2 or 3 years. Because when we went and we said we're going to write a book, and people write vanity books, Bruce totally not interested in that. So this thing we thought maybe write a book, and the first thing they say is, well, you got to have a lecture tour. You've got to all the things that you have to do. You have to go around in bookstores and do interviews. Bruce and I are totally disinterested in doing that. That's not what we're trying to get to. And then we discovered Amazon, and Amazon is a way that you can sell books. Amazon sells 80% of the books. This is not an ad for Amazon. I'm just saying, when you see the people that do the speaking fees, one of the things we learned early, because we did a lot of research, this is fascinating, something like 85% of the people that write books, if they're not writing it about money, the other thing is they're doing it in order not to make money on their books or sell books. It's a way to get people to pick up their services. So if I'm that's why, as Bruce says, 90% of the books are financial people. They're written by people that are wealth managers.
Yeah.
So you pick up the book and say, "Oh, Harry, this is good stuff. Let's call this person up and have him or her work out what we should be doing with the
Well,
finances."
it's like a lot of podcasts as well. It's a marketing tool.
It's exactly right. And that's not what Bruce and I were interested in. That's we're not interested in now. We're interested in selling the books, not marketing the books. And because we want to get the idea.
But it's so funny though. We have this glamorized notion. The people who haven't done it. I mean, I was a jobbing journalist for a lot. I went all over the world, Summitry, all of this stuff, and people have this idealized version of what it's like. No, it's airport, bus, rubber chicken, up with 2 hours sleep to do your piece to camera. I mean, it's a lot of work. And the same for the keynote, delivering a keynote on some lecture circuit. I think it's fine to a point, but it's a hard slog. And if
it's not just not what we're interested in doing. We've done this. We've given speeches.
We've done it.
We've done all that stuff. That's not what we're interested in. What we're interested in is trying to, as one of our many retirement projects, is try to help people have a successful retirement. How to help people from failing retirement and really ruining what can be the best years of your life if you do it right.
Yeah, because I'm also doing a lot in longevity and metabolic syndrome and all of these things that key into how we live our lives in good health, in good mental health, and find those moments of joy. I mean, you guys are exemplars of how to be dignified and find joy and be strategic about it as well, which is fantastic because people aren't. People are left floundering around.
That's why we wrote the book.
Thank you. One thing that I think, and having participated in enough of these to this point, that we've never directly talked about it, but I think Ted and I have had the benefit of having an internal sensor that tells us how much is enough. the whole concept of enough needs a lot more attention. This is one thing I have talked to my grandkids about. The system that we've grown up in the United States and in our situation is very competitive. And when you're competing for more. The idea of having enough financially, but in all the other areas is critical. And it's a very personal calculation. For some people, there's not enough attention from others. And for others, enough is one person. But the whole idea of working out that personal equation of enough is an enormous asset to have as you go through life.
Absolutely. And I've done all of that stock taking and self reflection. I'm 64. So I've been doing it ever since my 50s. And, I did a big edit. You edit people, you edit things, you change your mindset to away from attainment to attunement. You start to tune into what is enough. Is it the same for you, Ted?
Yes, absolutely. No, I think it's a process that you go through of figuring out how you're going to do it. And the problem is that, one of my favorite sayings, change is great, you go first. And so when you're talking about something as complex as the change, just change in general, but then specific. And I think that what drives us is it's not that hard to get on the right track. If somebody could just give you a guide, because as you get back to your point, the thing is that everybody thinks, well, we're just going to be happy. You summed it up beautifully, Susan, for us. Then I'm going to go home, I'm going to lie down in a hammock and life's going to be great.
Yeah, it's true. Well, we've been sold that false narrative, and it's still
We're
being
trying to sell
shoved
a new
out in
narrative.
the media. It's, from the financial services and the wealth managers and all of that. And it's everybody skipping down that beach and it's always a white couple and she's got gorgeous hair.
Yeah,
And,
right.
it's just silly. It's
Yeah,
just
no,
silly.
it
We
is.
all need to find our own purpose and meaning. And midlife, I know for you guys 30 years ago, it's
Yeah.
about that editing and stock taking. You take the inventory and reflect on what do you need? You don't need the new car or the new sofa.
Yeah.
What do you need spiritually, physiologically, intellectually to keep you alive?
Yeah.
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 I want to close with asking you, each of you in turn, when are you most content? Doing what and with whom?
Well, I mean, that's really easy.
Go
Family.
ahead.
Family.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
spending time with my wife, spending time with my kids, with my three daughters, and my wife Lynn and I went to Cape May last week for 4 days, just the five of us, and we spent 4 days together. That's it. But then doing things that help people. Again, there are so many people that need help. I have a good friend that goes down, and we have a big port in Wilmington, and the seamen come in from all over South America, and they come in and they want to take stuff home. And he goes down there. This guy was a big executive in DuPont. He takes them in a car and takes them to a Sears Roebuck so that they can buy clothes to take home to their family.
Fabulous.
Khakis and Jesus. So helping people is another big portion of it. But again, you can make retirement into the best years of your life. Not in terms of different years, but best years of your life.
Well, you have the freedom to be the person you want to be when
But
you were dashing about too busy for everyone else.
that's right. But it's also, that's the part, but what gets lost in the translation, and I'd like you to translate is, you also need to bring the discipline and the hard work that you learned working. But you've just got to, that's an important part of it, but on your rules, not on somebody else, not somebody else telling you this is what you're going to do on Wednesday. You figure out what you're going to do on Wednesday. That is all the difference in the world.
Bruce?
Yeah, my contentment answer is a synopsis of what Ted's just said. On Saturday evening, I had my whole family together because Jenny's birthday is this week. And fortunately, our family is in a geographic area so that we can get together. And there's absolutely, I have no words to express the pleasure of seeing my children, my children's spouses, my children's and spouses' children in turn, the grandkids, so enjoying each other and feeling welcome in two generations of satisfaction, happiness, fun stories. That's it. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
So you're in sort of a cradle of love.
But
Yeah.
the other side of it is,
Yeah.
that the children have lives of their own. Now, this idea that you're going to spend time with your grandchildren and children, they've got lives. I mean,
Yeah,
it's very to get our three daughters together was like a major project. So I mean, it's
Yeah.
wonderful when it happens and the rest of it, but it's your children have lives. People leave the town they lived in their whole life and they move to be close to their kids. They don't know anybody in the town. Their kids have jobs and important things they're doing, and a number of you know what I mean. That's kind of one of the ways people fail retirement.
In between, back to your contentment issue, in between the moments like I described the Saturday night party, I am content when I'm here in the environment that we have in Middlebury of gorgeous physical environment. I look to the west and all I see is a farm and an unspoiled land. I'm surrounded by interesting people, but I don't need the thrill of the big city. I've been there and done that. So the contentment comes from the situation that we've been able to build for us to just live our daily lives in. And it's that kind of ongoing contentment is the kind of thing that makes us, Jenny and I tell each other, just comes up in conversation about how incredibly fortunate we feel to have had the lives that we've had up to now. And she's been dealing with MS now for 13 years. So there's no small statement coming from somebody who's got dragging that kind of a burden along as well. So the contentment is multifaceted and aggregate of things that you've done along the way. And we're very fortunate.
Well, both of you are, and I'm very fortunate that you are sharing all of your insights with the big middle audience. Bruce Hiland and Ted Kaufman, authors of Retiring. Your next chapter is about much more than money, and as Ted pointed out, proceeds from the book are indeed going to charity. You'll find a link to buy it on Amazon on the show notes. I can't thank you enough, guys. Really delightful conversation, and just hats off for writing the book. And it's so wonderful to know that you're out there as 82 and 83-year-olds just enjoying your life, because the narrative certainly isn't that for many, many people who end up swallowing it whole and then making all the missteps that they can make, all the possible missteps. Anyway, thank you so much. Go well.
Thanks.
You too, Susan. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's it for the Big Middle this week, and you go well as well. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.